The Grand Council chamber gleamed with polished crystalline walls, each facet reflecting the gathered dignitaries from 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Thomas Reed adjusted his formal diplomatic sash, trying not to show his discomfort as dozens of metallic eyes turned to study him. "The human wishes to address the council," announced High Speaker Zenith, their multi-tone voice echoing through the chamber. "Proceed with your report on Earth-Arcturian trade negotiations." Thomas stepped forward, data tablet in hand. "Standard procedure. Present the quarterly trade figures, discuss potential expansion of technological exchange programs, then conclude with pleasantries. But today would be different." His heart raced as he thought of the real reason for his appearance. "Honorable council members," he began, "before discussing trade matters, I wish to announce my intention to court Princess Lyra of the Arcturian royal house." Silence fell for precisely 3 seconds before the chamber erupted. The mechanoid delegation's probability processors whirred audibly. The crystalline Solarians chimed in frequencies of disbelief. Several council members activated their universal translators, certain they had misheard. High Speaker Zenith raised all 4 hands for silence. "Ambassador Reed, surely you jest. Princess Lyra is—" They paused, searching for a diplomatic term. "Unsuitable for political alliance." "I am aware of the princess's unique qualities," Thomas replied carefully. "They are precisely why we are compatible." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Everyone knew of Princess Lyra's condition, her ability to experience emotions, a trait considered primitive by Arcturian standards. The royal family had tried every treatment to correct this perceived flaw, but their efforts only strengthened her emotional capacity. "The human speaks truth about compatibility," remarked Council Member Vex, their cybernetic sensors scanning Thomas. "Their species thrives on emotional responses. Perhaps he seeks a mate who can match their primitive behavioral patterns." Thomas bit back a sharp response. This was exactly the reaction he'd expected. "With respect, Council Member Vex, emotions are not primitive. They drive innovation, inspire art, and yes, help forge diplomatic bonds. Princess Lyra's unique perspective could bridge our cultures in ways pure logic cannot." "And what does the princess say of this?" High Speaker Zenith inquired, their tone suggesting they expected Lyra to have rejected such an illogical proposal. The chamber doors opened with perfect timing. Princess Lyra entered, her traditional Arcturian robes modified with subtle Earth-inspired designs. Unlike her people's typical silver skin, hers had a warm, almost golden hue, another flaw that marked her as different. "I accept Ambassador Reed's proposal," she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality unique to emotional Arcturians. "And I have data to support the diplomatic advantages of our union." She activated a holographic display, showing statistics on improved relations between worlds where emotional and logical species have formed alliances. Thomas smiled, admiring how she presented their love in terms the council would understand. "Fascinating," murmured Council Member Vex, their cybernetic eyes processing the data. "The statistics suggest a 47% increase in successful negotiations when emotional insight complements logical analysis." High Speaker Zenith studied the couple carefully. "You understand, Ambassador, that pursuing this union may impact your diplomatic standing. Many worlds still view emotional decision-making as unreliable." "Then perhaps it's time to reevaluate those views," Thomas replied. "Earth joined the Galactic Council because we believe in the power of diversity, in thought, in biology, and yes, in emotional capacity. Princess Lyra and I wish to prove that combining our different approaches creates something greater than either alone." The chamber buzzed with discussion. Thomas caught fragments of conversation. Unprecedented, potentially destabilizing, intriguing data. But he focused on Lyra, who had moved to stand beside him. Her subtle smile, barely noticeable to most, spoke volumes to him. High Speaker Zenith raised their hands for attention once more. "The council will need time to process this unexpected development. We will reconvene in 3 cycles to discuss the implications. Until then, Ambassador Reed, Princess Lyra, you have certainly given us much to analyze." As they left the chamber together, Lyra whispered, "They're already calculating how to turn this to their advantage." Thomas smiled. "Good. Let them think they're the ones in control. Sometimes the best way to change minds is to let them think it was their idea all along." The royal gardens of Arcturus Prime stretched for miles, their geometric perfection broken only by the experimental section, where earth plants grew in carefully monitored conditions. Thomas stood before a rose bush, explaining its significance to a fascinated Lyra. On Earth, roses symbolize love, but different colors carry different meanings, he said, gesturing to the varied blooms. Red for passion, white for purity, pink for admiration. Lyra touched a petal with delicate precision. "Fascinating. We have 47 categories of plant life, but none are maintained purely for emotional significance." Her golden skin reflected the sunlight as she smiled. "The Council would say it's inefficient." "The Council believes many things about humans are inefficient," Thomas replied, checking his datapad. "Speaking of which, we have the first recognition ceremony in 2 hours." The ceremony marked the beginning of traditional Arcturian courtship, a series of tests designed to prove logical compatibility between potential mates. No human had ever attempted them, and the council members had scheduled extra observation shifts to watch Thomas fail. "You've memorized the protocols?" Lyra asked, her tone carrying the subtle warmth that marked her as different from other Arcturians. "All 78 steps," Thomas confirmed, "though I'm still working on pronouncing Sithil Cree correctly." A shadow passed overhead, one of the council's observation drones. They weren't even trying to be subtle about their surveillance anymore. Thomas straightened his diplomatic uniform as they approached the ceremony chamber. Inside, 12 council members sat in elevated positions, their metallic eyes tracking every movement. The chamber itself was a marvel of Arcturian architecture, with walls that shifted and realigned based on ceremonial requirements. "First recognition begins," announced Ceremonial Master Vex. "The suitor will demonstrate knowledge of Arcturian historical lineages." Thomas stepped forward, his heart racing, but his voice steady. House of Light, descended from the first logical revolution, branched into 3 primary lines during the Great Calculation. He recited the complex family trees perfectly, watching the council members exchange surprised glances. But memorization was the easy part. Next came the logic trials. "Present your solution sequence," Vex commanded, activating a holographic puzzle array. Thomas smiled. For 3 months, he had studied with Lyra, learning how Arcturians approached problem-solving. But instead of following their rigid methodologies, he combined them with human intuition. The puzzle pieces moved under his guidance, forming patterns that satisfied logical requirements while creating an unexpected harmony. Several younger council members leaned forward, their interest piqued by this novel approach. "Unorthodox," Vex noted, "but effective." Lyra's subtle smile carried pride. She understood what Thomas was demonstrating, that emotion and logic could coexist, even enhance each other. The trials continued for hours. Thomas completed each one, not always in the traditional way, but always meeting the core requirements. He could sense the council's confusion growing. They had expected him to fail spectacularly, giving them reason to forbid the union. Finally, Ceremonial Master Vex announced, "The first recognition is complete. The suitor has passed all requirements." The chamber fell silent. Thomas bowed respectfully, hiding his satisfaction. "I look forward to the remaining ceremonies." As they left the chamber, Lyra whispered, "You've surprised them. They're already calculating new probabilities." "Good," Thomas replied softly. "Change happens one calculation at a time." A group of young Arcturians waited outside, their typically stoic faces showing hints of curiosity. One stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Ambassador, your solution patterns. They were beautiful." Thomas exchanged glances with Lyra. Beauty wasn't a concept Arcturians typically acknowledged. Perhaps their influence was spreading faster than the Council realized. "Tomorrow we begin the compatibility demonstrations," Lyra reminded him as they walked through the gardens again. "The Council will expect today was merely luck." Thomas plucked a pink rose, offering it to her in a very human gesture. "Then we'll just have to keep surprising them. After all, the best diplomatic victories are the ones that make everyone feel like they've won." Above them, the observation drone continued its vigil, recording every interaction for the Council to analyze. But neither Thomas nor Lyra worried. Sometimes the most powerful changes happened right under the watchful eyes of those trying to prevent them. The ancient archives of Arcturus towered before them, its crystalline spires containing millions of years of history. Thomas traced his fingers along the inscription at the entrance, translating the old Arcturian script. "Through knowledge comes understanding," he read aloud. "Through understanding comes evolution." Lyra nodded, her golden skin catching the light of the 3 setting suns. "Few outsiders are permitted here. The Council granted access only because of the upcoming succession ceremonies. They proceeded through security scanners, their credentials verified by ancient systems that hummed with power. The Archive's main chamber opened before them, endless rows of crystal data cores stretching into darkness. "The historical texts should be in Section 7, Lyra said, leading the way. "Before the logic revolution, our people recorded history differently, through stories rather than pure data." Thomas activated his data tablet, scanning for specific time periods. Their discovery had been accidental, a reference in Lyra's family records to something called the Great Separation. Now they sought the truth behind it. "Here," Thomas called out, his tablet connecting to a particularly old data core, records from the pre-revolution era. The holographic display flickered to life, showing images that made both of them pause. Arcturians dancing, laughing, creating art, expressing emotions freely. Lyra's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the hologram. "This can't be right," she whispered. "We're taught our species evolved beyond emotions naturally." "Keep watching," Thomas urged, advancing the recording. The images shifted, showing scientific facilities, genetic manipulation chambers, and crowds of Arcturians being processed through them. The timestamp corresponded exactly to the beginning of the logic revolution. "They didn't evolve beyond emotions," Thomas said quietly. "They engineered them away. A noise behind them made them turn." Council member Vex stood in the doorway, their cybernetic eyes processing the scene. "Interesting choice of historical period," Vex remarked, stepping closer. "Few access these records." Thomas stood protectively near Lyra, but she moved forward, her voice steady. "Why was this hidden, Council member? Why erase our emotional heritage?" Vex was silent for a moment, their mechanical systems whirring. "Progress requires sacrifice. Our ancestors believed emotions held us back from achieving our full potential." "But they were wrong," Lyra countered, gesturing to the historical displays. "Look at what we created when we felt freely. Art, music, innovations born from passion rather than pure logic." Thomas noticed something in Vex's posture, a slight hesitation. "You've seen these records before, haven't you?" "Some of us," Vex admitted, "have long questioned the wisdom of complete emotional suppression. But tradition and stability must be maintained." "Must they?" Thomas asked. "Earth's history shows that sometimes traditions need to evolve. Change doesn't mean destruction, it means growth." Vex studied them both, their cybernetic eyes flickering. "There are others in the Council who share these questions, but speaking openly of such matters is considered disruptive." Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying the warmth that marked her as unique. "Then perhaps it's time for disruption. These records prove that emotions are part of our heritage, not a flaw to be corrected." "A dangerous conclusion," Vex warned, but their tone held no threat, though one that might find support in unexpected places. Thomas recognized the subtle shift in the conversation. The younger Council members, They've been watching us, haven't they? Learning from how we combine logic with emotion. Vex moved toward the exit, pausing briefly. I neither confirm nor deny such observations, but should you continue your research, you might find the records from the Second Age illuminating. After they left, Thomas and Lyra exchanged glances. We're not alone, Lyra said softly. Others must be questioning the old ways too. Thomas pulled up more historical data on his tablet. Then let's give them something to question. The truth about your people's past could change everything. Above them, the ancient archive systems hummed, guarding secrets that had waited centuries to be rediscovered. As they delved deeper into the records, neither noticed the small group of young Arcturians watching from the shadows, their typically emotionless faces showing hints of something long forbidden: hope. The Exhibition Hall of Unity, normally reserved for major galactic trade conferences, had been transformed. Interactive displays lined the walls, each demonstrating the power of combining human emotional intelligence with Arcturian technology. Thomas stood at the central platform, watching delegates from across the galaxy filter in. The Council had granted permission for this exhibition only because they couldn't find a logical reason to refuse. The emotional resonance generators are calibrated, Lyra reported, joining him at the platform. Are you ready to show them what we've created? Before Thomas could respond, a group of young Arcturians approached, their silver skin contrasting with Lyra's golden hue. They'd moved with the precise grace typical of their species, but their eyes held something new: curiosity. Welcome, Thomas greeted them. You're just in time for the first demonstration. The lights dimmed as Thomas activated the central holographic display. Above them, a representation of the human nervous system appeared, interwoven with Arcturian neural patterns. For centuries, he began, the Council believed emotional responses hindered technological advancement. Today, we prove otherwise. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying that unique warmth that had once marked her as defective. By integrating human emotional processing with our quantum computing systems, we've created something revolutionary. The display shifted, showing a new medical scanning device. Unlike traditional Arcturian technology, which processed only physical data, this one detected emotional distress patterns, enabling more comprehensive healing. Emotional awareness enhances diagnosis by 47%. Thomas explained, noting several council members taking intense interest. Pain isn't just physical. Understanding its emotional component leads to better treatment. The young Arcturians moved closer, their typical reserve cracking as they watched the demonstration. One of them, bolder than the rest, raised a hand. This integration, it doesn't compromise logical function. Quite the opposite, Lyra answered. Emotion adds depth to logic, like adding new dimensions to mathematical models. They proceeded through more demonstrations: environmental systems that adapted to emotional well-being, communication devices that conveyed feeling as well as thought, and learning programs that embraced both logical and emotional intelligence. From their elevated observation platform, the Council watched with increasing attention. Thomas noticed several members engaging in rapid private communication, their cybernetic systems blinking rapidly. Now for the culmination, Thomas announced, activating the final display, a prototype for a new kind of governance system. The hologram showed an intricate network of decision-making protocols, combining Arcturian logical precision with human emotional intelligence. It was designed to make choices that were not just mathematically optimal, but beneficial for the well-being of all. Impossible, one council member declared, but their voice held uncertainty. Emotional variables would create chaos in the system. Watch, Lyra commanded softly, initiating a simulation. The system processed a complex diplomatic scenario, one that had previously caused conflict between logical and emotional species. As the simulation ran, it found solutions that satisfied both rational requirements and emotional needs, something neither approach had achieved alone. The young Arcturians whispered among themselves, their perfect posture relaxing slightly as they witnessed the possibilities. Even some of the older council members leaned forward, their cybernetic eyes recording every detail. "This is only the beginning," Thomas concluded. "Imagine what we could achieve by embracing both aspects of consciousness, the logical and the emotional." As the exhibition continued, more delegates arrived. Thomas noticed something extraordinary. The young Arcturians were starting to display subtle emotional responses, a slight smile here, a look of wonder there. Small changes, but unthinkable just months ago. "They're awakening," Lyra whispered to him during a quiet moment. The emotional suppression, it was never complete, just deeply buried. Thomas watched as a group of council members engaged in intense discussion with the human scientists who had helped develop the new technologies. "Change is coming," he replied, "faster than anyone expected." Above them, the holographic displays continued their dance of logic and emotion, showing a future where neither had to be sacrificed for the other. In the shadows of the exhibition hall, more young Arcturians arrived, drawn by whispered rumors of something revolutionary. The freedom to feel. The royal medical chamber hummed with ancient technology as the High King lay in stasis, his silver skin dulled by illness. Thomas stood beside Lyra as they received the diagnosis from the chief medical officer. "His neural pathways are degrading," the officer reported, their metallic voice devoid of emotion. "Traditional treatments have proven ineffective." Lyra touched the stasis field gently, her golden skin reflecting in its surface. "How long?" 3 standard cycles until succession protocols must be initiated." The medical officer's cybernetic eyes flickered. "The council has already begun preparation for the trials." Thomas studied the medical readings, remembering the ancient texts they'd discovered. The degradation pattern, it matches historical records from the Logic Revolution era. The medical officer tilted their head. Interest sparked. "Explain." "When your people engineered emotions away, there were side effects," Thomas continued, pulling up data on his tablet. "The brain requires both logical and emotional pathways for complete health." Lyra's eyes widened with understanding. "The royal bloodline. We retain traces of emotional capacity. That's why I'm different. That's why Father supported my flaws despite the council's pressure." The chamber door slid open as council member Vex entered, accompanied by 2 younger council representatives. "An interesting theory, Ambassador. One that might explain certain patterns we've observed." Thomas recognized the subtle shift in Vex's tone. "You've seen this before." "The council has noticed increased neural degradation in recent generations," Vex admitted. "We attributed it to environmental factors. Because the alternative would question the very foundation of our society," one of the younger council members added, their voice carrying a hint of something almost like frustration. Lyra moved to the medical displays, her diplomatic training evident in her measured response. "Then perhaps it's time to question those foundations. The succession trials test for logical perfection, but what if that's not what our people need?" The medical officer processed this, their cybernetic systems whirring. "The princess speaks with concerning emotion, yet her logic is sound." "The succession trials begin in 2 days," Vex noted. "Princess Lyra's siblings have already begun their preparations. They will follow the traditional paths." Thomas stepped forward, an idea forming. "But the ancient laws don't specify what form the trials must take, do they? They only require the candidate to prove their ability to lead." The younger council members exchanged glances. "Technically correct," one admitted. "The specific format of the trials can be adjusted by council vote." "Then I formally request a review of the trial protocols," Lyra announced, her voice carrying the warmth that had once marked her as defective. Now it marked her as something else, a bridge between 2 ways of being. Vex's cybernetic eyes studied them both. Such a review would require significant support within the council. "Look at the medical data," Thomas urged. "Your people's future may depend on finding balance between logic and emotion. The succession trials could prove which path leads to survival." The medical officer added their own data to the display. Current degradation rates suggest population-wide effects within 7 generations, unless interventions are found. A heavy silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the hum of medical equipment keeping the king stable. Lyra stood straighter, her presence somehow both regal and deeply human in its compassion. "I call for an emergency council session," Vex finally declared. "The succession trials cannot proceed without addressing these findings." As they left the medical chamber, Thomas noticed more young Arcturians in the corridors, watching with barely concealed interest. Word was spreading, faster than the council could control. "They're afraid," Lyra whispered, observing the subtle tensions among the council members ahead of them. "Not of failure, but of success. Of what it means if I'm right." Thomas took her hand, a gesture that would have scandalized the council mere months ago. Now, the younger members merely watched with curiosity. "Sometimes," he replied softly, "the most logical choice is to embrace change, even when it frightens us." Above them, in the royal towers, ancient systems continued their countdown to the succession trials, unaware that they might witness not just a change of ruler, but a transformation of an entire civilization. The ceremonial archives stretched deep beneath the palace, its crystalline walls holding millennia of royal traditions. Thomas followed the ancient markings, Lyra by his side, as they descended to the lowest level. "No one has accessed these records in centuries," Lyra said, her golden skin providing natural illumination in the dimly lit chamber. The council preferred to reference their modified versions. Thomas activated his tablet, scanning the crystal data matrices. According to the historical texts, the original succession ceremony was different. It tested more than just logical processing. They reached a sealed door marked with symbols predating the logic revolution. Lyra placed her hand on the scanner, her unique genetic signature, once considered a flaw, causing the ancient systems to hum to life. "Recognition confirmed," the system announced. "Royal bloodline variant detected. Access granted." The chamber beyond took their breath away. Holographic displays activated automatically, showing scenes from ancient ceremonies. Arcturians dancing, singing, their emotions flowing freely while their logical minds remained sharp and clear. "Look at this," Thomas called, examining a particular recording. The original succession trials required candidates to demonstrate both emotional wisdom and logical mastery. Lyra studied the ancient text scrolling beside the hologram. The final trial required the heir to feel the people's needs while calculating the most efficient solutions. They believed perfect leadership required both heart and mind. A sound behind them made them turn. Council member Vex stood in the doorway with several younger council members, their cybernetic eyes processing the historical displays. "We suspected you would find this place," Vex said, stepping forward. "The question is, what do you intend to do with this knowledge?" Lyra straightened, her diplomatic training evident in her response. "The law states that succession must follow the original protocols unless formally amended. These were never amended, only hidden." "A dangerous interpretation," one of the younger council members noted, but their tone held more intrigue than warning. Thomas activated another hologram, showing the complete ceremony. "Look at the results they achieved. Their civilization flourished when they embraced both aspects of consciousness. The current council will resist," Vex warned, though Thomas noticed they were carefully recording every detail of the ancient displays. "They believe emotional integration would destabilize our society." "It's already destabilizing," Lyra countered. "The neural degradation, the growing unrest among our youth, the failing diplomatic relations with emotional species. We're facing collapse if we don't adapt." The younger council members moved closer to the displays, their perfect posture relaxing slightly as they watched their ancestors express both logical and emotional mastery. "We've received reports," one of them admitted, "of spontaneous emotional development among our youngest generations. The suppression is failing naturally." Thomas shared a knowing look with Lyra. "Then perhaps it's time to guide that development rather than fight it. These ancient trials could show us how." Vex processed this information, their cybernetic systems humming. You propose to undergo these original trials. They would test capabilities our people have suppressed for generations. I propose to demonstrate that emotion and logic can coexist, Lyra declared, that they must coexist for our survival. The chamber's ancient systems continued displaying scenes of their ancestors' ceremonies, each image challenging centuries of enforced emotional suppression. The younger council members watched with increasing interest, their own carefully controlled expressions showing hints of change. The law is clear, Thomas added. These are the true protocols. Any attempt to prevent their use would violate the very logical principles the council claims to uphold. Vex studied them both for a long moment. We will need to present this evidence to the full council. The implications are significant. As they prepared to leave the ancient chamber, Lyra paused at one final display. It showed an Arcturian leader from before the logic revolution, their face showing both the calm of rational thought and the warmth of emotional wisdom. This is who we were, she said softly, and who we could be again. Above them, the palace systems continued their countdown to the succession trials, unaware that the very nature of those trials was about to change. In the shadows of the archive chamber, more young council members arrived, drawn by whispered rumors of discoveries that could transform their world. The great trial chamber blazed with ancient lights, its crystalline walls reflecting the gathered assembly of council members, royal siblings, and diplomatic observers from across the galaxy. Thomas stood among the witnesses as Lyra prepared to face the first of the restored ancient trials. The trials of succession begin, announced High Speaker Zenith, their voice echoing through the chamber. Princess Lyra has invoked the original protocols. The chamber's holographic systems activated, creating a three-dimensional representation of a star system in crisis. Traditional trials would have simply required calculating the most efficient solutions, but these ancient tests demanded more. Lyra stepped into the simulation zone, her golden skin gleaming under the ethereal light. Her siblings watched from their assigned positions, their silver faces showing subtle signs of uncertainty at these unfamiliar protocols. A colony faces destruction, the trial system announced. Their sun approaches nova. Resources allow evacuation of 87% of the population. Calculate your response. The traditional solution would be simple. Select colonists based on practical value and logical efficiency. Instead, Lyra closed her eyes, combining emotional insight with mathematical precision. Divide the fleet, she began, her voice carrying that unique warmth. But not by conventional metrics. Family units remain together. The psychological impact of separation would decrease survival rates by 23% post-evacuation. The council members stirred, their cybernetic systems processing this novel approach. Thomas noticed several younger members leaning forward, intrigued. Secondary waves of ships, Lyra continued, manipulating the holographic display, will be crewed by volunteers. Our historical records show that allowing for self-sacrifice increases overall efficiency. People work harder to save others when they choose their role. The simulation ran her solution. The survival rate jumped to 94%. Impossible, one of her siblings protested. The mathematical models are incomplete without emotional variables. Lyra finished. Hope, determination, sacrifice. These aren't flaws in the equation. They're essential components. The trials continued, each scenario more complex than the last. Lyra faced diplomatic crises, resource shortages, and interstellar conflicts. Each time, she demonstrated how combining emotional wisdom with logical analysis produced superior results. Thomas watched as the younger council members began taking notes, their traditional stoicism cracking slightly as they witnessed the potential of this integrated approach. Even some of the older members showed signs of reconsidering their positions. The final trial approaches, High Speaker Zenith announced. The test of unity. The chamber's holographic systems created a perfect replica of the Arcturian capital. Within the simulation, thousands of citizens went about their daily routines, each one a complex calculation of needs and responses. Feel their needs, the ancient system instructed. Guide their path. Lyra raised her hands, connecting with the simulation. Through her unique ability to experience emotions, she sensed the subtle currents of unrest, the hidden potential waiting to be unleashed. Our people don't need more suppression, she declared. They need balance, integration, the freedom to feel while maintaining our logical strength. The simulation responded to her guidance. Throughout the holographic city, citizens began displaying small signs of emotional expression. Not the chaos the council feared, but a harmonious blend of logic and feeling. Efficiency rates rising, reported the system. Social cohesion increasing. Innovation potential expanded by 42%. The chamber fell silent as the final calculations appeared. Lyra's approach hadn't just matched traditional results, it had exceeded them in every measurable category. The ancient protocols, council member Vex observed, appear to have been designed with greater wisdom than we understood. Thomas watched as more young Arcturians slipped into the chamber, drawn by reports of what was happening. Their faces showed something that had been hidden for generations: hope. The trials are complete, High Speaker Zenith announced, their voice carrying a hint of what might have been wonder. The results are unprecedented. Lyra stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the fading holographic lights. She had done more than prove her right to rule. She had shown her people a new way forward, a path that honored both their logical heritage and their emotional potential. Above them, the ancient systems hummed with approval, as if they had waited centuries for this moment of awakening. The coronation chamber gleamed with the light of 3 suns, its crystal spires reaching toward the stars that had witnessed centuries of Arcturian rule. The assembled dignitaries from 1,000 worlds watched as Lyra approached the ancient throne, her golden skin radiant against the traditional royal robes. Thomas stood at the designated position for royal consorts, his diplomatic training barely containing his pride as he watched history unfold. The council members arranged themselves in their traditional formation, their cybernetic eyes recording every moment of this unprecedented ceremony. "We gather," High Speaker Zenith announced, "to witness the ascension of Princess Lyra, chosen by the original protocols, proven by the ancient trials." The chamber systems activated, projecting holographic representations of Arcturian history around the gathering. Images of their people before the logic revolution merged seamlessly with scenes from Lyra's trial victories, telling a story of transformation. The crown recognizes not just logical perfection. Zenith continued, their voice carrying subtle undertones of emotion that would have been unthinkable months ago, but the wisdom to guide our people toward a new future. Lyra knelt before the throne as the coronation artifacts were brought forward. Each piece held significance: the crystal of reason, the circlet of judgment, and finally, a newly forged element, the band of harmony, representing the bridge between logic and emotion. "Rise," Zenith commanded, "and speak your oath to our people." Lyra stood, her voice clear and warm as she addressed the assembly. "I swear to lead with both mind and heart, to honor our logical strength while embracing the emotional wisdom we once forgot. Together, we will forge a path that makes us stronger, not through suppression, but through integration." The younger council members moved forward, presenting the crown. Thomas noticed their traditionally rigid movements had softened, showing hints of grace that their ancestors had possessed. "The council recognizes this ascension," Vex declared, "and acknowledges the wisdom of the ancient ways. Our people stand ready for evolution." As the crown was placed upon her head, Lyra reached out to Thomas. A murmur passed through the assembly. Never had an emotional being been invited to share this moment. But as Thomas took her hand, the chamber's ancient systems pulsed with approval. "Let it be recorded," Zenith proclaimed, "that on this day, the Arcturian Empire embraces a new era. Logic and emotion, wisdom and feeling, united in purpose." The coronation crystals blazed with light, their energy patterns shifting to recognize the dual nature of their new ruler. Throughout the chamber, young Arcturians watched with unconcealed wonder as their own suppressed emotions stirred to life. The integration protocols developed during the trials, Lyra announced, will be made available to all who wish to explore their complete nature. None shall be forced. Choice itself is part of our emotional heritage. Thomas stepped forward, his role as consort now official. The Earth delegation pledges full support for this transition. Our scientists and empaths stand ready to assist. The chamber's holographic systems displayed scenes from across the Empire, crowds gathering to witness the ceremony, young Arcturians already beginning to express themselves in small ways, ancient art being restored to public spaces. Change will not come easily, Lyra acknowledged, addressing the lingering concerns of the conservative council members. But neither did the logic revolution. We are a people of transformation, capable of extraordinary adaptation. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas watched the assembly disperse. The older council members moved with their traditional precision, but the younger ones lingered, studying the historical displays with newfound interest. "It begins," Lyra said softly, standing beside him on the throne platform. "Not just for our people, but for all species who thought they had to choose between logic and emotion." Above them, through the crystal spires, the three sons of Arcturus Prime cast their light across the capital. In their combined radiance, Thomas saw a metaphor for their achievement, separate sources of light, creating something more beautiful together than apart. "The Council's predictions of chaos were wrong," he replied, watching young Arcturians embrace their emerging emotions with characteristic precision and care. "Your people aren't losing their logic, they're completing it." The ancient systems hummed in harmony as a new age dawned for the Arcturian Empire, proving that the greatest wisdom comes not from suppressing differences, but from embracing them all.